So my name is Jeb Blount, and I'm the author of the #1 bestseller, Fanatical Prospecting. And I'm here with my good friend, Anthony Iannarino. And Anthony is what I call the smartest man in sales. Anthony is the author and the publisher of the sales blog. He's got a new book coming out this fall that I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about. The pre-sales will start on that very soon. And Anthony and I are BFFs for I guess, can we be BFFs? We're good friends. We talk every single day. And for the folks that are coming on, you know that this event was scheduled at the very last minute. And in fact, it was about 30 minutes ago that Anthony and I got on the phone together, and we talked about some experiences we've been having this week with salespeople who have come to us looking for ways that they can deal with the fear of rejection. And most of those ways are trying to find some cheesy way around actually asking for what they want. If you follow my podcast or you follow Anthony's writing, you know that Anthony and I've done a couple of things in the past on fear and a couple of interviews that have been pretty well received and listened to. So we thought we would take it to the next level. I'm going to turn this over to you, Anthony, right now and let you introduce yourself to folks and tell them a little bit about your background and why fear is something that you spend a lot of your time talking to audiences about.
I think first we have to start with how your book got to #1. I mean, specifically, it was my sharing it, right?
That would be true. I'll give you 100% credit for the fact that Fanatical Prospecting is #1 because you sent it out to your list of people.
Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not, but here is the book. It's an outstanding book. I can't tell you how many people I've recommended this book to, and I continue to get emails back. I think I forwarded you one I got last week that said, I've been with this company for 25 years. In that time, as a group, we've read 4 books, and this has changed the way that we're prospecting completely. And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. People need a guide. And again, we can get back to fear. My book, October 11th, the only sales guide you'll ever need, I guess minus Fanatical Prospecting, you still might need this one. Published by Portfolio, and you're definitely going to hear about it. You're going to hear about it on Periscope. You're going to see webinars because we're sales guys. That's what we do. And Jeb is the hardest working man in sales. There's no doubt. He's on the road 364 days a year, I believe. And I've been stepping in and talking to his wife, pretending to be her husband so she has somebody to talk to.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, fear is a great subject, and it shows up in a whole bunch of places in sales. It shows up in asking for commitments. It shows up in dealing with concerns, dealing with the customer is going to say no, and this is why. And if I don't say anything, then I can hope it goes away. It shows up in asking for access to the people that you need and risking alienating the person that you're working most closely with. So we see it over and over and over again in sales, and it shows up in lots of different ways. And I'll go back further. The reason that this has become a keynote for me is because once you understand fear, and this is something you spend a lot of time on too, Jeb, and you and I have worked together and had conversations about this with 600 people in a room explaining how the brain and the mind works. It's part of how we are born and how we come into this world. We're comfortable when we're in the womb. We're completely protected. Every one of our needs to keep us alive is taken care of. And then we're cast out into this cold world full of light. And immediately we start struggling for survival. And so the instinct, inside the reptilian brain is to survive at all costs. So anything that feels like it's going to threaten you in some way starts to manifest as fear. But there's a lot of things you can do about it once you understand where that fear comes from.
Well, why don't we step back and let's talk about the brain. And where fear comes from. So you're right. We not only do we come out of the womb and our brains are wired to be afraid because fear keeps us alive, but it's further back than that. I mean, it's evolutionary. If we look at, we go back 10,000 years ago, there were literally things in our environment that were set up to eat us. I mean, you'd be out hunting some food and the food was also hunting you. So your brain operates at 2 levels, the conscious level and the subconscious level. And it operates in a really simplistic way across 3 core parts of the brain. There's the reptilian brain, or the reactionary brain, or the autonomic brain. There's a couple of glands there called the amygdala that are designed to allow your brain to keep you alive. Right now, even watching this webinar, subconsciously your brain is scanning your environment to make sure that you're safe. You have the emotional brain that takes this neurophysical response that you have little control over, that's driven by the reptilian brain, and turns it into something that you feel as rejection. And then you have your neurocortex, which is your rational brain, which is able to talk to both the emotional and the reptilian brain and help them understand what's happening in the environment. The problem that we face when we're dealing with fear, or the potential of fear, is that the reptilian brain, or the autonomic brain, these glands called the amygdala, they take over before anything else happens. That's why, for example, if you're driving down the street and the person stops in front of you, all of a sudden you slam the brake on. You don't stop to yourself and think about it. So in sales, when you're faced with the potential of rejection or rejection, there is a neurochemical reaction that happens throughout your body, where adrenaline is released, where blood rushes from your brain into your muscles to get you ready to defend yourself. And this is what creates that sort of funky reaction where you begin to stumble over your words, you don't know what to say. And if it's, you make that choice. Do I fight? Do I, stand my ground and stand up for myself? Or do I fly? Do I run away? When you're talking to people about this reaction or this response in the brain in your keynotes, how do you help people understand that? Because I think it's important that people can visualize what's actually happening to them.
Yeah, what it is, and it's interesting that you point out the three brains. We've got the reptilian brain, or the cerebellum. We've got the limbic system, and then we got this giant neocortex. But what we know now about the brain is that there are more channels up out of the reptilian brain into the neocortex than there are back. What this means is that the rational brain has to work really hard to affect the limbic system and the reptilian brain. There's not as many pathways or channels back. And there's a reason for that. We've evolved to survive. And so anything that feels like a threat, the channels coming from the reptilian brain through the limbic system up to the neocortex are so much more powerful and so much hardwired. And that's the reason that it's easy for us to survive. So when we feel threatened, even though we have the ability to rationalize it and put it into perspective, we still have this fear that somehow we're going to be threatened, or somehow we could lose certainty, or we could lose significance, or we could be ostracized by our tribe and cast out and be alone. So all these things are going on until you sort of experience them in a way that allows you to rationalize them. And I talk to people a lot about this, Jeb, in this way. We tend to fear the wrong dangers. We tend to think that if I ask the customer to let me talk to the other stakeholders I know are going to be important to making a deal, that I'm going to lose that relationship. And then if I lose the relationship, I'm going to lose the deal. But the greater risk for most of us is that if we don't ask for what we need, then we end up losing the deal because we didn't do what we should have done. So we have to find a way to determine what is the greater danger. But your brain, over 3.5 million years of evolution, has decided losing the relationship is more risky to me than my real danger. And so the rational brain allows us to start looking at that and having a conversation with ourselves about how do we face that fear? How do we step into that fear? How do we ask for what we need in a way that we can retain both that relationship and get to the stakeholders? It's just one example of the things that we fear.
So we got somebody on Periscope. A couple. I'm looking at Periscope now, but there was a couple of questions that came through. One question. One person asked me. We're going to stop for a Periscope break. One person asked me what my biggest fear is, and I'll tell you straight up, my biggest fear is the fear of failure. I hate to lose. And so the reason that I work as hard as I do is that I know that if I can stay ahead of the game, that I'm not going to fail. The second thing is another person wrote that I hate this, this lizard brain, psychobabble crap. And I want to address this straight up. This is neurochemical responses. If you understand this, you get it. Whether you want to call it lizard brain or evolutional brain or what have you, there is what Anthony called it scientifically the cerebellum. When you get faced with fear, or when you get in a situation, for example, when you get mad at somebody, what happens is adrenaline is released, there's a couple of glands behind your kidneys that release adrenaline into the bloodstream. What happens that gets your muscles ready to perform at peak performance. It is designed to keep you alive. And whether you think that we were all created in 7 days, or you think that there's no evolution, I really don't care. This is the truth. You can disagree with the facts, but this is the physical thing that happens to you. So what happens at that point is all the blood rushes from your brain into your muscles. So when you get dealt a rejection, when someone tells you no, and you're trying to deal with it, what's happening basically is that you're trying to overcome that rejection while you're drunk. That's why when you get mad sometimes and you have an argument, you can't even remember what you said. That's why the stuff that comes out of your mouth doesn't sound rational at all, because you can't think. And that's the way your body is hardwired. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get control over it. What Anthony was explaining is that it's harder, though, because the neocortex has a harder time telling the basically your reactionary brain and your emotional brain what to do. It's 2 against 1. So what you have to do is you begin to learn techniques and triggers and ways of dealing with that fear of rejection, dealing with the neurochemical reaction or responses happening inside of you, so that you can, as a human being, manage the situation. Because here's what's happening. When you're faced with rejection, your autonomic brain, your cerebellum, is going to keep you alive. And it doesn't know the difference between a prospect telling you that they're not going to have any time for you today and a grizzly bear that is chasing you in the woods. In fact, the neurochemical reaction and the feeling that you have, that tense muscle, what's happening in your gut, is exactly the same as if a grizzly bear was chasing you or if a person is rejecting you. It's not as intense, it's not as prolonged, but it's exactly the same. Anthony, what do you think?
It's even more than that. Have you ever had a nightmare and you woke up and you were petrified? It doesn't even have to be real for your brain to perceive it as real. If you even imagine the threat, the brain can perceive it as real. Right now, Periscope is a very interesting thing. I'm glad you took a break. I've got one question. Can you rewire your brain to deal with this? That's one of the questions. But there's one gentleman who is telling the bald guy talking to shut up, et cetera, et cetera. And so that could feel like fear that somebody doesn't like me. But to me, because I've learned to deal with being judged by other people, a tremendous fear, I think it's highly entertaining. And it just makes me smile, because that's somebody dealing with their own fear of not being enough, or not having enough, or wanting something that they don't have. Let me say, yes, you can change the way that your brain is wired when you're dealing with these fears. And you do have to face them, though, and you do have to step into them. And we can talk about all the fears that people have as they go through the sales process. I mean, starting with cold calling. People are afraid to pick up the phone and call because they don't know what somebody's going to say on the other end, and they feel that they might get rejected. And so that rejection, to them, if you fear that, is a personal thing. It's against me personally. They rejected me. When in fact, we know they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting what you offered them at that time, probably because they're too busy, probably because they already have somebody that sells them what you're trying to sell them, probably because your pitch didn't sound like it created a ton of value for them and it was self-oriented. And if you can change those things and step into that fear and make the call again and again and again, pretty soon you lose all the fear of it and it loses all the power over you. And you find out that there really is no risk. There's no danger for you. The greater danger is that you don't make the call and that you don't go and help somebody who needs your help. But you have to be able to say, what's my greater risk? What's my greater danger? And then find a way to step into that fear. And you don't have to do it alone. You can get help. You can get coaching. You can get training. You can listen to other people make the call and watch that they never get hurt. Jeb, when I used to train salespeople, the first thing I would have them do with cold calling training is I would have them make a fake call to me. And as soon as they asked me the first question, I would scream at them at the top of my lungs in front of a room of people. And everybody would just die laughing. And they thought it was the funniest thing in the world. And I said, well, that's what you're afraid of. And you laugh when I do it here because you realize it's ridiculous and it's not going to happen. The worst thing that's going to happen is somebody hangs up on you. And that's not a terrible thing. And you just have to break through and take the first step. And then you find out what you're really afraid of isn't all that scary.
So let me take a contrarian view. So
I love it when you're contrarian.
Well, this is the thing that, I find a lot of sales trainers, especially in the corporate world, they love to say these things. They're cliches. They're like, okay, when you're prospecting and and someone, tells you no, that it's not, they're not rejecting you, but they're rejecting your idea. Don't take it personal. Let that roll right off your back. And to me, personally, I think that's a little bit insincere, and I'll tell you why. You said this to the person. When you get rejected, it feels personal. I mean, look, you're putting your heart and soul in your career. You're making phone calls. You're working hard every single day. You're trying to take care of your family. You're trying to advance your career. You want to close business. You want to help your clients. You feel that way. I mean, I know so many salespeople who get up every day and sincerely want to go into the workday helping people. And so to tell you that don't take it personally, I just don't think that's the right thing. What I say to people is this: it is personal. It is absolutely personal, and see it that way. I will never tell you to let fear roll off your back like a water rolls off a duck's back. What I will tell you is that if you are unwilling to deal with that fear, if you're unwilling to feel that fear and feel it personally, but do it anyway, sales is not the place for you. If you're unwilling to feel that fear and do it anyway, then you're never going to get the raise that you want. You're never going to get the promotion you want. You're never going to get the girl or the boy that you want. You have to be able to feel it. And I just don't want people to go, it's not there, because it feels real. It doesn't have to be real. I mean, your neocortex can tell you that it's not real, but it feels that way.
For a time, it does feel real. I mean, for a time, until you have enough of the no's, it does feel personal. And I'll tell you, I'm going to agree and I'm going to disagree with you, because I love arguing with you anyway, just for fun. But the interesting thing about it is, no matter what happens, you have to own that you got to know. And if you can own it, then you can change, because you can say, what I did didn't work. I need to change my approach and try to create greater value for that person. Or I need to be more driven towards the business outcome that they need and come in with a better pitch. And the fear that you should have is the fear that you're not being thoughtful about it. You're not adjusting your approach. You're not changing it. You're going to get no's automatically. I mean, you're going to get no's, and you can fear the rejection personally, like Jeb says, but ultimately I would just own that and to improve. The next call I'm going to get rejected, so I don't want to feel good about that call.
Okay, well, so owning it makes sense to me. This is where we talk about, especially when we're working with clients, we talk about something called sales drive. And sales drive is a combination of optimism, need for achievement, and competitiveness. And we know that people who are highly competitive do really well in sales careers, because here's what they do. When they get in a situation where they get rejected, or fear hinders them, or something holds them back, or they ask for what they want and they don't get it, the difference between the competitive person and the non-competitive person is the competitive person gets pissed off. They get mad. They literally own it. And they use that fear, that energy that is created by fear, to drive them to find another solution, to look for another way, to try something different. But when they're down, when they get knocked down, they've got this sort of thing inside of them that says, if I can look up, I can get up. And I think part of dealing with fear is finding the competitor inside of you and learning how to turn that on, so that fear doesn't hold you back, but it drives you forward. Yeah. Because it makes you so mad, because you want to win.
Anytime you're mad, it's a fear. What's it a fear of? It's a fear of losing. It's a fear of having the identity of having lost. It's a fear of not having the certainty that you're going to be able to accomplish your goal. And that's a healthier fear.
By the way, I hate to lose. I've got fear of losing. I'll do anything to lose.
See, that's the thing. For most of us, we fear the wrong dangers. That's fearing the right danger. The right danger is not doing a good enough job to win, not preparing enough for the big sales call once you've got the appointment. We tend to fear the wrong things, because the way that we've been wired over time is that the risk is to us personally. The greater risk to all of us personally is not doing what we should be doing, because it makes us a little bit uncomfortable. It just makes us a little bit uncomfortable. Nobody ever gets beat up or harmed or hurt in any way selling, especially not on the telephone. Nothing bad ever happens to you. You're never threatened personally. Your identity is still intact when you walk out the door, but we're afraid. And if you step into that fear and you say, I can ask for the commitment I need, I can get what I need from this person so that I can help them. And you start dealing with that. Or even, here's one I got this week, Jeb, a fear of asking for referrals. What if they say no? Well, what if they say no? Well, then I'll be embarrassed. Well, maybe they'll be embarrassed that they don't have a referral for you. But that fear of just asking for the referral. And the person said, when should I ask for a referral? And I said, at the very beginning of the sales process. And they're like, how would I do that? And I'm like, you tell them if what I can do for you is exactly what you need it to be, and I can get you the results and I help you at the end of this, I'm going to come and I'm going to ask you if you can refer a couple other people who might benefit from getting those same kind of outcomes. Is that okay with you? And they go, yeah. I mean, there's no fear, but the fear prevents people from doing something. And this is in a company who almost 80% of their largest customers come from referrals. You have to ask, but the fear holds them back.
So let's take a quick Periscope break. So I got a couple of things from Periscope viewers. Thank you guys very much. Love all the hearts there. So a couple of questions. One is, this is a comment. Somebody said that we're channeling Les Brown, and thank you. I mean, if that's a great compliment. I love Les Brown.
I'm going to disagree because somebody just insulted Les Brown, who we both love.
So someone else said that one question, and I love this, how many people live in non-existent cages? These cages that they put around themselves. And I think the conversation we just had about referrals is that person was living in a world that they were creating that didn't even exist. And I see that happening a lot, where people create a future that's not there. And we'll come back to that in just a minute. Another person said that if when you learn how to use anger, like use your competitive drive, what they said I thought was really good is learning how to do that so that you can concentrate your focus on a single thing, on a singular mission. And when you can do that, that's one of the things that drives great entrepreneurs forward. It moves salespeople to ask. And one of the ways that I practice this, by the way, and this is for salespeople, is when I have something that I fear. Let's say, for example, I'm afraid of asking for a referral, or especially if I've got a stalled deal where I know that when I ask, they've got to make a decision. They're going to do business with me or not. A lot of people hold on to those deals because the fantasy of maybe or hope is better than the reality of no. When I'm faced with those things, one of the things that I've done in my career is that when I get a victory, usually a big victory, I close the deal and I feel my best, like top confidence, I'll pick up the phone or walk in the door and I'll ask the hard question. And what's amazing, and goes back to the person on Periscope who said, people live in these cages. What's amazing is that this future that I'd already created in my mind about why they wouldn't say yes, never existed. And walking through the door with that confidence and just asking for what I want helps me get what I want. And the more I do that, the easier it gets for me to be able to ask those questions when I'm not in that state. Being able to create that state by myself, because this goes back to, can you rewire your brain? By creating the habit of asking, by creating the habit of facing fear, I basically do something that Joe DeCina says in his awesome book, Spartan Up, which is build obstacle immunity. You still have the neurophysical reaction to the fear, but you become immune to it, and you're able to jump through that hoop without all of the guy on Periscope says, the cage being built around you, creating a future that doesn't exist.
Yeah, and the obstacle immunity comes from having an experience, surviving that experience, learning what you need to learn, going into the next one with greater confidence. I mean, if you look at people who perform and probably, I think it's unarguably the most dangerous profession, the military. They have fear every time they engage in battle, every time. But they're well prepared and they know what the rules of the engagement are supposed to be. And they've rehearsed it in their mind. They've rehearsed it in practice in a safer environment. So the fear doesn't overcome them. They've rehearsed it enough to know what actions do I need to take when this happens. I remember, Jeb, when I was taking flying lessons, before they found out I was taking an anticonvulsant for having a brain surgery, and said, "You will never fly alone, ever." But I was like 16 hours into lessons. But the very first lesson, you're in a small airplane, a Cessna 172, and they say, pull the throttle back. And literally it's just like you just pull the throttle back. That's it. And you pull it back just like a half an inch and the plane just barely moves. It's like, no, pull it. And you pull that thing and the plane just starts barreling down the runway. And you've got to pull back on this yoke and make the plane go up into the air. And it's already horrifying because you've never done it before. And the very first thing they do when they take you up, they get you comfortable for about 5 minutes and they say, okay, now we're going to stall the plane. And you say, why on earth would we stall the plane? That sounds like a bad thing to do. And they say, it's the worst thing that can happen to you. The worst thing that you can have happen when you're in an airplane is a stall. So we're going to rehearse stalls every time. And they take the plane up at such an angle that it starts to get wobbly because it doesn't have enough energy to keep moving up at that pitch. And all you do to correct it is push the yoke forward and level the plane off. That's all you have to do. But while you're doing it, there's alarms screaming and the plane is wobbly and it's frightening. And when most people get scared, they pull the yoke back to their chest and that flips the plane over and it spirals to the ground. You can learn to flip out of those, but that's not something that you want to learn. You want to learn how to never get there. But they give you that fear right from the beginning because they do not want, you rehearse it every time you go up into the air because you do not want to learn how to do that having never experienced it before. So I'm going to experience it. I'm going to get used to it. And when that plane gets wobbly, you're going to push the nose down automatically. And that's what happens to us. That's how we build the obstacle immunity. As we go through it enough that we start to be able to rationalize it, we start to be able to objectify it, and then we have the power to deal with the fear and get the outcomes that we need.
So I'll go back to, my early career. So one of the biggest fears those people have is cold calling. I spent the last 2 days with Jeffrey Gittimer at his location, shooting videos and doing webinars on cold calling.
That's something to be afraid of right there. Just Gittimer.
Well, yeah. So when I was early in my career, 23, 24 years old, the one thing that I feared the most, I hated the most, I'm a weird cookie because I actually like to be on the telephone. I have no problem calling people up and getting rejected on the telephone. But what I really feared and really hated was getting rejected in person. So going and cold calling at someone's door, knocking on the door, interrupting their day and walking in. So what I did was I made a pact with myself that every day I would do 5 knock on the door cold calls, walk in the door cold calls, 5 every single day. It wasn't the most efficient thing I did. I wasn't really good at it, but every day I did 5. And I did that for an entire year. And after a year, it wasn't scary to me anymore. I could walk in, and by the time I became a sales manager and I was with my people walking in doors, I would walk in any door, anywhere, anyhow. But I had to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it until I could do it. And I think that's where, with salespeople, if I were giving salespeople advice, I would say, find the thing in your day that you fear the most, whether it's asking for an invoice if you're sitting across from someone, or asking for a stakeholder, or asking for the next step, or asking for the appointment, or asking for the sale, whatever it is. And think about, small chunks. Take that fear and set a small goal with yourself. Take that fear so many times a day, every single day. And you'll find that it's easier to manage things in small chunks, and then to try to look at it in the big picture. Any other advice that you have for salespeople in their regular sales day to face fear and build this obstacle immunity?
Yeah, you said something earlier that I want to go back to. Fear is real. I mean, and if somebody has fear, telling them, well, you don't need to have that fear, doesn't help them overcome the fear. It's not an intellectualizing that helps you overcome the fear. It's the experience. It has to actually get into your body to do that. And I will tell you some of the ways. If you have a fear, one of the best ways if you're in sales is to find somebody who doesn't have that fear and go and model what they're doing. Go and watch them do it. If they're great at cold calling because they're absolutely fearless, listen to what they say when they're rejected and how they respond. Listen to how they overcome 1 or 2 objections so you start to get a feel for what that experience feels like. If you're afraid of walking in the door and being physically rejected, go with somebody who doesn't have that fear, because actually being there and experiencing it and watching it will help build your immunity to it, because you'll see that there's not any real danger here. There's no real danger for you, even though to say that it's irrational to have the fear denies what we know, and that is that you have the fear because it's born into you, and if it's something that you have not experienced before, you're right to fear it. So I think get a model. That's the first thing I would say, and then join that model on calls and go through that experience with them. That will help build your immunity to it. And then the second thing, there's nothing better than rehearsing in a safe environment. I'm reading Charles Duhigg's Better, Fast, what is it? Smarter, Faster, Better. And he's got a section in there on this research that Google just did about what makes some teams work better than others. And the thing that makes it better is psychological safety. I know I'm not going to be judged. I know I'm allowed to share. I know these things can happen. But if you rehearse the conversation you need to have in a safe environment, and you have people give you challenges, and then you get the feeling of that in your body, and you get to go through that experience, you start to build the immunity to it. And then you can go out and start practicing it. But it's steps that you can take so that you build that over time. And then after you get the experience for yourself, you'll find it diminishes even quicker when you're actually doing it in real life.
Well, that's the power of role play. When I deliver sales trainings, so much of what we do is role play, and people fear role playing. And you see how people progress. The more they role play, the less they fear that. But if, for example, if you're a manager, and you've got to go.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second on that, because I know that everybody already hates it that you said role playing. They're like, role playing, I hate role playing, and the same people that say that love football. And between Sunday when they watch films and the following Saturday, they role play. That's all they do is role play.
Over and over again.
You look at a great act, a great music act, or a theater or an actor. They rehearse, they role play. If you look at the military, they role play. Anybody who performs at the highest level, they go through the exercise of role playing. What could happen, and how am I going to deal with it when it does?
So, for example, one of the things that I do is I practice what I call turnarounds. And that's when someone rejects me, they say no to me. How do I handle that? And here's what I've learned in sales in particular. There are a finite number of ways that people can tell you no. Most salespeople think that there's an infinite number of ways. So every time they get no, they think it's a unique event. But there's only a handful of ways. And let's just take prospecting. I'm not interested. I'm happy. Send me some information. We already have a service for that. We're just shopping around if you're getting an inbound lead. I mean, it's finite. Now, they don't always say them that way. They say them in different patterns. But one of the things that for me I've developed is when I hear that pattern, I know exactly how to respond. So I never have to think about it. So all of those things, and I forgive us, Bart, we're going to go back and talk about brains for a second. Bart wrote he didn't like that. But this is about.
Do you feel like Bart's judging you?
But,
do you feel like this is personal?
It was personal. It hurts me. I fear that. So, but when you think about it, right, all of those things that happen when you face fear are still going to happen. You have absolutely no control of the neurochemicals response to fear that happens inside your body. However, what you can do is create triggers that allow your thinking brain, your logical brain, your rational brain that says, this is not real, to catch up. So, for example, when someone tells me I'm busy, so if someone says I'm busy, I go, that's exactly why I came by, or that's exactly why I called. And that's what I call an anchor. It's an anchor language. When someone rejects me, I know exactly what to say. That split second allows my neocortex to kick in and come up with something that disrupts the situation. So, for example, if you said I'm busy, I'm going to say, oh, that's exactly why I called, because I figured you would be, and I wanted to find a time that would be more convenient to you. By using that language every single time someone says I'm busy, I don't have to ever worry about what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say. So as the adrenaline in my body begins to take the blood from my neocortex to move it into getting me ready for fear, I'm on road. And that goes back to role playing and practicing and practicing and practicing. For example, if I approach a prospect and they say, I'm happy, I say, that's fantastic. If you're getting a good price and a good service, you should be. I say that every single time. That gives me time to catch up and adapt to the unique situation and manage that. For example, if someone says, let's say, for example, I'm asking for the next step. And one of the things I usually ask for, I'm in B2B services, and I want to go tour the facility, or I want to go meet other stakeholders. They say that, I say, that's exactly why I'm asking, because I'm different than my competitors. My competitors have a box that they make you fit into. I build the box around you. And the only way that I can build the box around your unique situation is to learn more about you and your business. So why don't we go ahead and set this up for next Tuesday? And by having that pattern of speech, no matter what they bring at me, I'm able to manage that. And once, by the way, you're able to get past all of those crazy things, that feeling of fear, both irrational and rational, that's happening inside of you, at that point, you catch back up again, and you can go back to being the brilliant, charismatic human being that you were before you started going abba, 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 abba when the person told you no.
It's a good strategy.
So what other strategies do you have for salespeople in particular? Let's talk about in the sales process. So we talk a lot about pipeline velocity. So I'm in the sales process, and velocity says I'm moving to the next step as fast as I can in order to get to the close. And that process has got to be modulated, right? If you go too fast, you screw up. If you go too slow, right? And Dave's asking if those scripts are in writing. Yeah, you can get them in my book, Fanatical Prospecting. Anthony, you can show them that book again.
I will. Here's the book, Fanatical Prospecting.
Yeah, you can get them there. For fanaticalprospecting.com. There's a secret code in the book. Those scripts are on fanaticalprospecting.com in our membership area. But
you know what's funny? Before you go on, this says it's got my name on there, author of 17 Elements, and then the publisher changed the title. When you do the second printing, we have to correct it.
Oh, we'll fix that. So you're in the process, right? So there's two things, right? I need to move to the next step. I need to close. And especially in more complex deals, closing is not really something that happens. It's something that evolves over all those micro commitments. So what are strategies that you teach salespeople in the sales process to get micro commitments and move to the next step?
Yeah, the best thing that I do is say, what are all the commitments that you need between target and close? And it's really, the fears end up popping up around those commitments that we have to gain. So it's, I need them to give me more time, or I need them to give me information that's confidential and private to their company, and they're resisting giving me that. I need to meet all the stakeholders. I need to ask them to invest more than they're investing right now. I need to ask them to vet my solution before I present it. I need to ask them to share all their concerns with me so that I know how I'm going to lose and I can do something about it before that happens. And there's about 10 or 11 commitments that you need from target to close. And there are fears around each one of them. I mean, a pricing fear is amazingly powerful. When somebody says, Jeb, I need to know what your prices are. They're like, oh, my price is, and I know my price is higher.
Let me stop you for a second. Don't. So I want to stop everybody. I want you to listen to what Anthony just said. I know that was stream of consciousness, but I'm letting you go on. So Anthony just said, he said there are, how many commitments do you have to get along the way?
10 or 11.
10 or 11. Okay, let's say there's 10 commitments that you got to get in order to get to the close. And each one of those commitments is what we call a micro commitment. There's small commitments that lead to a big commitment. What most salespeople do is they skip over all those micro commitments and they ask for the big commitment without any value whatsoever. Okay, so that's one thing you have to understand. You got to go through the process. The second thing is this. This goes back to the commitments. If you knew what those commitments were, Anthony, if we listed them all out, right, we can know what they were, and we would know what the finite number of responses that we would get if we asked for each commitment. And we could practice those responses. Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Right, go on. I'm sorry. Got me excited. I got on my soapbox.
Yeah, we want to skip because it makes us uncomfortable. So I know I need Jeb to let me talk to Carrie and Brad and Andy. I know that. But if I ask him, then Jeb's going to think, why is he going around me? Why does he want to talk to these other people? I want to control this, and now he's going to let these people in, and I'm going to lose control. So now I've dredged up their fear, right? So I'm afraid of asking that, but if I don't ask, then I don't get what I want. So all of these micro commitments all come with a risk attached to all of them, and the risk is real, but the danger of not embracing that risk is greater. And I started to talk about my favorite one because this is the one I see a lot of people struggle with. It's early in the sales process, and I say, Jeb, I need to know what your price is going to be, and they go, oh, we're not ready to talk about price right now because I don't really know, what, and they know they have the higher price, and they fear having to tell the customer their price is going to be higher. And what should they be doing at exactly that moment? Telling them the price is going to be higher and explaining what the value prop differences are going to be and how it's going to produce better results. But they go, if I say that, then I'll probably lose. But if you don't say it, then you've already told them that you have a higher price. And even you're afraid of talking about that higher price because you're uncomfortable with it. And if you're uncomfortable with it, now you've made them uncomfortable with it, and you've betrayed the value that your product or service or solution presents. So we have to look at all these, and we have to look commitment by commitment and say, what's the fear and what's our greater risk? And then to your point, what's the language? How do we embrace this and engage in it in a way that allows us to effectively get the outcome that we want?
And when they say no or ask a question, so for example, I ask for plant tours. I like to go through your business, especially when I'm working in manufacturing. And people say no. They say no almost every time. You say, can I have a tour? And their question is, why do we want to waste our time? And the biggest ask that you have in sales is for someone's time. It's the scarcest resource. They can't make any more. And when you're asking for time, people want to know, why should I give it to you? And so I know that's going to happen. I know that when I fall into that particular pattern, that they're going to say, why should I do this? And all I need is an answer that connects with them emotionally that allows me to do that. And what I would suggest that you do is think about all the steps that you have to pass through in your particular sales process. And go to the sales blog and check out Anthony. He's got a bunch of things on that. But look at each one of those things. And if you're a sales leader, do this. Go through all those things. Same thing on prospecting. When you're prospecting and you're asking for an appointment, information, or to move into a sales conversation, what are the common ways that people tell you no or reject you? And then take each one of those ways and create an anchor that allows you to say whatever you're going to say that gives you time to catch up and think. Disrupt their expectations. And this is important because what salespeople don't often do is they give the same pattern answer that every salesperson does. Like you were talking about the pricing thing. Well, we're not really ready to talk about that yet. Every person says that. If you play into someone's expectations, the buyer, they're going to hit you with another rejection and they're going to hit you with the same script. But if you disrupt their expectations, you actually pull them towards you. So that's why, for example, if someone says, I'm busy, Dave, listen to this because I'm going to give you this one more time. If it says, I say I'm busy, I go, that's exactly why I called, because I figured you would be. And I want to find a time that's more convenient to you. I'm not arguing them into taking time. It's only going to take 5 minutes or whatever. I'm responding to where they are. Take each of your situations and build those scripts around that. We're not going to give it to you. If you want those, hire us. We'll do it for you. Otherwise, go through that process. And then, and this is cool, role play. Role play, role play, role play. Now, there's one more fear in here. Roger wrote this, Anthony. He says that his biggest fear, well, this is the last one we're going to take, folks, and we're going to move on because it's Saturday and we got stuff to do and my bracket's doing really well, so I got to go check that out. Roger says his biggest fear is wasting time targeting the wrong people and spending too much time with them, and not being able to get that time back. And I think that that's brilliant. I think that the most expensive thing that salespeople do is spend time with the wrong person. And if I were a salesperson, my greatest fear would be that I wasn't using my time wisely. And that's what you talk about, is fearing the right thing. So let's take this one subject on time and in sales and why you should fear using your time poorly.
The only finite, non-renewable resource in your life, time. I wrote this blog post, but I let my editor look at it, and she's like, "Don't send that out." It's just a conversation in my mind I had with death, and you just do not have enough time. You definitely don't have enough time to do all the things that you want to do. Here's the fear that comes along with that, Jeb, from my view. The fear is I have to get into a qualification conversation early, and I'm going to offend them trying to find out whether they're really qualified or not. And so because I fear that, I'm not going to qualify them, and then I'm going to spend time and find out later on that it's not real. So that's the first fear, is that if I ask them, then I'm going to offend them. The second thing, though, I'm going to say just about this before I tackle that. You should have a finite number of targets that you know are your dream clients. I like the number 60 because it's 15 calls a week. It's 3 every day outside of your normal prospecting to say, no matter what happens, either they die or I die, but I'm going to break these 60 over time. And I think that's going to give you a lot more control over your destiny. So the thing about qualifying and tackling that fear is you have to ask some questions. You have to say, is this kind of thing the right kind of thing for you to be looking at right now? And if there was a problem here worth solving, would we be able to get the support and the internal resources right now? Or would this be something that has to be pushed into the future for you? These are not offensive questions. What's offensive is spending time with people. I'll tell you why salespeople do this is because when people are receptive, we love it. Jeb, they're talking to us. They love what we're talking about. They're so engaged with what we're doing. They're wonderful people. You got to meet them. It says nothing about whether or not they're going to buy. They're just receptive. And then when we leave receptive and we go to that dream client list that I'm talking about, they're completely unreceptive. They already have somebody sitting in your chair. That person's doing good work. They've got a strategic partnership. It's cold. It's going to take me a long time. We fear the wrong danger. The danger is spending time with receptive people who are never going to buy and not spending time with your real targets who are going to be hard to convert. And that's the difference between success or failure for most people in sales is spending time in the right one of those equations.
So that's, we'll close this thing out. I work with a lot of inbound inside sales teams, and we teach them there's 4 basic types of callers who come in inbound. There's grouch, there's directors, there are interrogators, and there's socializers. And it's funny that salespeople have a tendency to spend most of the time on the grouch and the interrogators who never buy. And they really don't like spending time with the directors who tend to say, here's how I want it done. Or the socializers who say, actualize me, make me feel good, and I'll buy from you. Salespeople, because of their own fear of not feeling important, of not feeling significant, they want to spend time with the buyers who make them feel important and significant. It's a really weird psychological thing. And once people become aware of that, they're able to change. Once the salespeople see what they're doing, they switch. So let's end today with awareness, and why awareness of what's happening, which is why Dave, we spent some time talking about what actually happens inside of you from a neurophysical standpoint and a neurochemical standpoint, so that you can become aware of that. Let me ask you, Anthony, just give me 2 tips that you would give to people to become aware of what they fear, so that they have a better opportunity of tackling that.
I'll give you the one biggest one. This is the biggest one. If you have a fear, write it down. Write down what you're afraid of. Write down what you think that the real danger to you is, and then write down what the real danger might be. And here's why I want you to write it down, is because as soon as you get it out of your body and you write it on paper, you've objectified it. You've taken it out of your body, and now you're looking at it as an object somewhere else. And once you start developing an awareness of objectifying the fear, it becomes easier for you to get control of it. So that would be the first thing that I would tell you to do. And the second thing, if I have to give you one, is you're afraid of the conversation. Start developing the scripts and rehearsing so that you're comfortable, and it's not the first time that the words you're saying have come out of your mouth. It's the 100th time, and you don't feel the same kind of fear that you felt the first time you said it.
Beautiful. And I echo that. I think that by taking time to write down what it is that you fear and focusing on a finite thing. So leaving this webinar today, your homework is this. Think about the things in your sales day that you fear the most, not in a broad term, but a very specific term. Think about when and where and with whom you have those fears. When do those feelings emerge? And put yourself in state so that you can actually feel that feeling, get yourself back in that place. Write down where you are, what you're doing, and then with that awareness in hand, go back through and think about what are the things that could happen, what are the responses that you could have, and then begin thinking about strategies that you can work through. And then finally, go seek out next week every opportunity to face that particular fear. Don't try to tackle everything, but face it so that you begin to build immunity and you begin to learn how to manage that when it happens and break through and take control of your career. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for this totally impromptu webinar and Periscope. Everybody on Periscope, give our friend Anthony over here some love. If you can see old Anthony there. Love for Anthony. Thank you. And we will have this recording done. We're going to edit it out a little bit, clean it up. And for the folks that are members of fanaticalprospecting.com, you can you're getting all kinds of love, Anthony.
Nice.
Members of fanaticalprospecting.com, I'll have it posted there. And Anthony on the sales blog, I'm sure you'll have it in a nice little corner over there someplace, and you'll send it out to your folks. And we'll also have it up in a couple of places where people who are not members of fanaticalprospecting.com or not members of the sales blog will be able to get access to the information. Anthony, final word.
Nothing. Thank you for having me on, brother. It's a good time.
All right, man. We're going to stop the broadcast now. Y'all have a great Saturday. Hope your bracket does well.